Welcome to How Preschool Teachers Do It.
This is Allison Kentos. I am an early childhood educator.
And this is Cindy Tarabush. I am an early childhood consultant.
This podcast is for parents and early childhood professionals.
Let our experience and research-based knowledge become your guide. Welcome back to the podcast. In a prior episode, Allison and I mentioned talking about the demise of Letter of the Week.
Yeah.
And there is somebody, I wish I had like an ability to play taps, but I don't see it. So just pretend, because Letter of the Week is going, there is a demise. And when I talk about Letter of the Week, what I mean is teaching children letters in isolation. Like today is D week. Everyone write D's, everybody trace D's, everybody copy D's, everybody find something that starts with D, and next week we're doing F, and we will never return to D.
D ever again. Yeah.
Bye, D.
Yeah, so, because that's not how you learn letters.
No, it's not. So
it's really not how you learn anything.
It's really not. Here's a couple of things that the studies have proven. When people say, what do you mean? It's how we always did it. Here's a couple of things they've proven. First, children need to see letters near other letters so that they can, without realizing they're doing it, compare the shape of one letter to another. When we show them just one letter, D, 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 they're not comparing visually, and that causes a problem. We also have learned that children don't take those individual Letter of the Week lessons and actually connect it to reading.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
That's a big problem.
And there was this very interesting study that was done. So what they did was kids were like, let's say it was the letter D week. And the researchers went in and said to the kids, what letter is this? They showed them a D. And the children all said D. You know why they said that? Because it's D week. And you know how we know that? Because they went back on like H week and held up a D. And said, what letter is this? And the only kids who knew it were kids whose names start with D.
D. Yeah.
So that was like, as soon as we move on to more letters, that's a little bit gone for the kids who don't care about D. And they don't connect it to reading, and I think that's an important thing. So I'm just going to put this notion out there, Allison, and then we can talk about what people should be looking for early childhood settings to do instead of Letter of the Week, and what teachers need to grasp they need to do instead of Letter of the Week. Ready? Here's a notion for you. Instead of teaching children that these are letters and they make words, we need to teach children these are words, they're made up of letters.
They're made up of letters, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
We need to do it sort of in the opposite direction. So instead of Letter of the Week, this, by the way, people who know me, and I know there are people who listen to this podcast who know me. I do consulting in their settings, and I know they're listening, and I know you've heard me say this, but I just want to put out there, this topic was Allison's idea.
Yay!
Okay? This is not just me promoting the thing that I've done in the settings. This topic was Allison. Yeah.
Proof of this is in a previous episode. So if you have subscribed and listened, you would know that it was my idea. I wanted to talk about this in the Circle Time episode, and she stopped me.
So my dear clients, I just want to say this. It isn't just me looking at you and saying, stop Letter of the Week.
Stop Letter of the Week.
It is the early childhood world. So, Allison, I do want to, because people are so used to me going in and saying this, I do want you to talk about what do you do instead?
So I do more, well, my kids that I teach are much younger, so they don't really.
Doesn't matter. People were doing Letter of the Week.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We're doing Letter of the Week, guys. Now, I have even told my boss I don't do Letter of the Week. And I thought she was going to fire me at once, but she was like, oh, okay, because I just don't. And I told her, I'm like, they just don't learn that way. And, I do more words with them, and I start with their names. That's how I start. And their name as a word first. I try to do name recognition first. This is your name. This is what it looks like. This is the shape of your name. And I do that first. And once they can recognize their names, which takes a little while for the kids in my age group, then we start doing here are the individual letters of your name.
Of your name.
And
don't you think
of your name.
I think most preschools start with their name, and then they abandon ship on that whole.
They abandon it.
They start with their name because their name matters to them. And then they abandon that and go to things that don't matter to them.
that don't matter. Yeah.
But
So
you need
I
to
always
stick with
do
the things
their name.
that matter to them.
Right. Always go with what matters. So I always do the names. Rusty, stop. I always do the names first because that's what they're all about them. It's always about them. And then I'll do words that matter at the time. Like if it's Mother's Day and we're writing a Mother's Day card, I'd be like, here's how you spell mom. You know, if you want to try to spell it, here are the letters that go into it. But mom is a word, you know, and you need to use all 3 of these letters to write the word mom, or dad if it's Father's Day, or, you know, like something like that. It's always about like what's going on in their world. You know, when I worked with older kids, when they were 4, they were more into their words than anything. So, but it was always, we had a little word wall, but it was very much what they were into. And at the time I taught that class, you know, the movie Frozen was out. So they knew all, yeah, it was, yeah.
That was a thing in
It was a
preschools.
big
Okay,
thing.
go ahead.
But they had known, and they knew how to read or at least recognize all of the characters of Frozen. So it was a way to introduce them to, you know, so they knew the character and how to read Elsa's name and Anna's name and Olaf's name. And then because they were so into that, I would be like, okay, look at Olaf's name. And thank God the characters' names were short. I mean, it was kind of easy. Olaf's name starts with an O, you know, and then they started getting O's, you know, and then, so I always kind of went with what my class is always about what the kids are into. So, I mean, if you're into Frozen, hey, we'll go with Frozen for a month, you know, I mean, so it was a good way to learn their letters. And, you know, when we did a topic about the zoo, they were into the letter Z big time because we were learning about zoo, you know, so then they learned the letter Z because they wanted to learn about zoo. I just kind of always, it has no order whatsoever. I mean, it just kind of is, here's what we're interested in, here's what we're capable of. You know, if you know how to read and recognize your name, now you're ready to recognize the letters of your name.
And here's
that's
a notion.
how I started.
Here's a notion. Not every child should be learning the same letters at the same time. You can do this as a small group or individual activity in small group. You know, like, let's say you're learning the letters in your name and I'm learning the letters in my name. And let's say next you're going to learn the letters in your sister's name and I'm going to learn the letters in my brother's name because that's what matters to me. And when you do this with kids, eventually you get the majority of the alphabet in there. Yeah. But you're doing it in a way that's really meaningful. You know, and that's why in a prior episode we had talked about taking dictation. It's really important for children to see the words they've spoken in writing.
Yes.
If they've spoken it, we can point out things about letters. But we're still pointing it out in words. And I think that you start with the word, then you go to the letter, and then maybe you go on like a fun letter hunt, or you find the names of your classmates that also start with that letter, where you know, like, who else has, like, my name is Cindy. There's an N. If N somehow came up, right? There's an N in my name. Let's find all the other N's in people's names. And that's how you focus on N.
That's usually how I do with the whole dictation. Like when I'm doing dictation at my meeting time, that's usually how I do. Be like, oh, look at this, you know, look at Cindy's name. Cindy's name has a D in it. So does, you know, this person's name, you know, and like, oh, wow, look at that. And usually I just leave it at that. Look at that. Like I'm amazed that I just discovered it, you know, even though I've known this forever, you know, but I always pretend that I'm discovering it with them, you know, and then you get the whole like, oh, wow. There'll always be one of the kids be like, wow, look at that. Our names do have the same letters in it, you know, or sometimes I write my name up there and I'd be like, oh, look, Allison. Allison starts with A. So does Alexandra's name. Look at that. That's so cool. It makes the same sounds, you know, like, and I just like, you know, and then you get them at least talking about it, like, because now they're, you know, at first they don't realize that their words have letters in it. They just think, oh, okay, there's my name.
Yeah, they're not making that connection.
They're not making the connection.
We have to give them the connection, and especially when we give them letters in isolation. You know what the truth is? You give them a sheet of D's to write, they're going to write those D's just so they go back, just so that they can get done and go back to pretending in the dramatic play area. Like they're not really caring about it in the way that we wish they would. I mean, there are always kids who are kind of perfectionists, and there are always kids who are going to try to form the perfect D. But I want you to go back to those kids. I want you to go back to those kids in 4 months if their name doesn't start with D, and see how that goes.
Yeah.
Because they're not in the early childhood years, particularly before kindergarten, they're not making those connections. And you're always going to have kids. What are you doing? You're making so much noise there. What are you doing,
Sorry,
lady?
I'm trying to get my dog to not bark anymore, so I'm putting like
It's
peanut
making
butter
a
in a
lot of
little.
noise.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So,
I'm putting
you know,
peanut
on
butter in
behalf
a
of the
little treat
listeners,
thing for him.
on behalf of the listeners of this podcast, I'd like to just ask, what are you doing? Okay.
Sorry.
So anyway,
I'm trying to be quiet about it, but
that was me.
Rusty's
That
not
was
quiet.
me being easily distracted.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
which happens with children too, and we shouldn't get so upset with them.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, when we isolate these letters, I promise you, it doesn't have nearly as much meaning as when we do it through words. And here's something that early childhood teachers, particularly before kindergarten, keep saying to me. But the parents expect photocopies of traced letters. Like, they expect these sheets of traced letters to go home.
Okay, then educate your parents.
Thank you. Like,
Yeah.
what, if I'm going to sit and I'm going to say I am actually expert in child development or the goals for children or teaching children, can I not teach them the right thing?
Yeah.
Like, people will say this to me all the time, but the parents expect. They say that to me about the alphabet. They say that to me about crafts. And I'm always looking at them saying, so teach the parents. I would be happy to give you, research-based information that you can share with parents. I have that stuff.
I have that for you. Yeah.
Right? Like, I will happily give that to you so you can help the parents. If, by the way, you're listening to this podcast and you would like some written things that you can give to parents, you can check my blog. Go to helpingkidsachieve.com, hit read my blog, and then on the upper right, there's a search. Search up there. You will find information having to do with this and other topics. And you can go on to Google and Google why no more letter of the week or what to do instead of letter of the week. And loads and loads of articles come up.
Lots of stuff.
Loads of stuff. You know why loads of stuff come up? Because it's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
By the same token, if you go to Google and say, I love letter of the week, you're going to find articles having to do with keeping it because it is the internet and anybody can write on the internet. So I would like to refer to a prior episode of this podcast and say, if you have not listened to it already, please listen to the episode that is entitled, Is Your Expert Really an Expert?
Ah, yes. Let's go back to that one.
Let's go back to that oldie but goodie, because not everyone who is writing things on the internet is an expert. Painful for me to say as somebody who blogs, but folks, I actually have credentials that are covered in that podcast. So please make sure that what you're reading has to do with the latest studies within the past 5 years or so. And please seek this information out. Because both as a family member who should be expecting children to learn literacy in more meaningful ways, and as a staff member who needs to learn how to do this, it's vitally important.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about how you do letters, Allison, before we have to actually, we're on almost 13 minutes.
Well, I would say please don't do projects that have to do with letters either.
Oh.
Because that does not work.
No, that does not work.
Like, when you're making, if it's letter F week and you're making a frog, the children are not correlating that frog that they are making, which go back to the episode, you shouldn't be making frogs, that craft versus project versus art episode.
That was an oldie but a goodie.
An oldie but goodie, but there are teachers doing this. You shouldn't be making projects based on the letter. You know what I'm saying? So you shouldn't be. Please eliminate that from your life too, okay? Because it does not mean anything to the child. That art, that craft doesn't mean anything to the child. They're not going to correlate the letter with that frog or whatever it is. So just eliminate all of it.
Just like we've said about other things, we need to keep things real for children.
Yeah.
Real use of letters is letters and words.
Yeah.
So start with the word, go from there. Start with the words that matter to them, go from there. Right. So what matters to me right now, Allison, is concluding this episode because we try so hard to keep it within about 15 minutes.
I can't believe we're only at 15. Okay.
Yeah, we are. We're already there. So let's conclude it. Do you want to tell the people what we'd like them to do?
Please stop doing letter of the week.
Yeah.
Please.
Please. Please.
Please.
Yes.
it does not work.
And while you're on the internet looking up blog articles of mine or other information about what to do instead, please rate and comment on our podcast.
Yes, please.
Hello, wonderful podcast listeners. This is Cindy. Allison and I revealed really big news on our recent live episode. We now have a website dedicated to this podcast. Go to howpreschoolteachersdoit.com to read stuff we've written, to check out the latest news, see the topics for upcoming episodes, and to contact us. We'd love to hear from you.